Hello, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a spiritual conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm Megan Rounds, and welcome to today's show. Today's guest lives along the North Oregon coast with her 15-year-old son, Frank. She has a wide variety of interests, but has studied health and wellness most of her life. In an effort to overcome chronic illness, including several autoimmune diagnoses, and also because a serious car accident 6 years ago left her with a traumatic brain injury, broken back, and PTSD, where Western allopathic medicine was unable to heal her, she found that energy healing brought her great relief. She's been a member of the Lightworkers Lab for about 3 years, and her metaphysical gifts include intuitive, healer, claircognizant, clairvoyant, and multidimensional medium. Some of her more specific interests include the science of energy, sound, crystal and Reiki healing, intuitive and Akashic readings, meditation, and shamanism, just to name a few. She's also an artist of painting in clay, and was a successful healthy foods cafe owner, techie, and accountant bookkeeper before shifting into the work she does today, offering one-on-one treatments and group healing using an array of energetic practices in her spiritual business. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Christy Kay. There we go. Woohoo! Hi, Christy.
Good morning. Good afternoon, wherever you're at.
Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, let's get right to it. As we've spoken previously, I had mentioned that the big question I like to ask for this program is about your spiritual journey. To tell us about your spiritual journey wherever you want to start, and then pepper in there, if you can, how you made your way to the Lightworkers Lab.
Absolutely. It's quite a journey, actually.
Sounds like it.
I was trying to think of where to start, but I started when I was born. I'm a spiritual being in a physical body, and I think the first 40 years of my life, I really suffered because of that, because I didn't realize that I was a spiritual being. I knew there was something going on. I've had a lot of interesting experiences, but I didn't really start accepting it until the last probably 7 years after the accident. I gotta stop saying that. So I was born in a very Catholic family, and with that came a lot of guilt and shame, and I didn't know there was a separation between religion and spirituality for a long time. I thought they were the same thing. And I was required to go to church daily. I was in a Catholic school for 12 years, but I never really felt comfortable there. I felt more comfortable doing the after-school activities where we went and did service for the local community, and I had a special affinity for Jesus and Mother Mary, and I didn't realize there was a difference between the religious figures and the beings I had been talking to. I spent most of my younghood outdoors. I spent as much time as I could outside, and my mom actually encouraged me to leave the house. She couldn't take the noise of us children. But I spent a lot of time alone, and I spent a lot of time in my neighbor's yard. She had these, I called it a forest. In the city where I lived, it was kind of a forest. We didn't have a lot of concentrations of trees. We had big yards, but they were for playing football or baseball, and it wasn't a trees kind of thing. So I spent a lot of time in my neighbor's yard, and sometimes she asked me if I had a home. But that's where I felt most at home, was in nature. And that's where my love of nature started, when I was young. And that's where my spirituality was. That's where my life, that's where I felt joy.
I would
My
say,
neighbor
oh, go ahead.
was,
No, I
no,
was just going to say we share that affinity. I grew up outside too. We grew up in the same state, I believe, and you didn't mention it, so I won't. But there were a lot of wooded areas, and I spent most of my childhood out there too. I think that, I mean, I'm thankful for that now. But I totally connect to that. Do you have a home thing? I spent a lot of my time at my friend's house, and the parents were. I mean, they just were like, "Yeah, you're one of the family," and I kind of felt like it because I spent sometimes more time there than at mine.
yes. It was a safe, it felt safe to be among the fairies and the devas.
Yeah.
And I didn't put the connect, like, I remember that, but then there was a forgetting when I reached high school and wanted to be like everybody else because I wanted to fit in. And I kind of pushed that aside for a long time. And that's when the chronic illnesses got really bad. And when I started becoming a sickly person and I was unhappy and I lost my connection of sorts for a very long time. Um, I ended up meeting my husband. We got married. We moved to the Oregon. We moved to Oregon, and I had a dream shortly after we moved to Oregon. And my grandmother came to me, and she said she was dying, and she wanted to say goodbye. And I had it was a very, very lifelike dream. And I believe I was talking to her in the astral planes, but I didn't even know what that was.
Sure.
The next morning, I called my dad and asked how Grandma was, and he said she's just fine. Why? And I told him, and then he called me a few hours later and said, "Don't ever dream about me, because your grandma's in the hospital and she's dying."
Oh, wow.
And that was the first time I realized I had this gift of sorts. I didn't know what it was or what to do with it, but that was, I think, when the first light bulb went off. And again, life happens. We moved a few times. Ended up at the coast. I got pregnant. I had my child, and then I was just in survival mode. I was unhappy. I lived in this beautiful place. I was doing IT work. I was in service to my community, which has always brought me peace and joy, is being of service. But I still was very unhappy. I was also working in a restaurant. It was slightly abusive. A lot of restaurants, I don't know if you've worked in the kitchen, they are slightly abusive. And my friend was going through cancer treatment. I was driving her to and from. I drove her 2 hours each way for treatment. I was working really hard. I worked at a benefit one night, and on the way home, my car went off the road. And I don't remember what happened, but I subsequently ended up with broken vertebrae. I had a brain injury. The police did not take me to the hospital. And I suffered PTSD from that and the trauma that ensued after that. And I laid in bed for literally almost a year, just wanting to die.
Well, do you mind if I ask why they didn't take you to a hospital?
They assumed that I had been drinking and I should be arrested. This is a common thing in the county I live in.
Wow.
Which I found out later. And but that was terrible, and that was really hard, and I couldn't get out of bed. And I really wanted to just be gone. But I had a wonderful 3-year-old at the time who needed me. And I had friends who didn't give up on me. I had a lot of friends who did. A lot of people can't handle people in pain, and I did lose some friends. But the point of the story is I had people who didn't give up, who kept showing up. And one of them knew Reiki. And she came one day and worked with me. And it was like a switch happened in my soul. She like switched me off to on. And I started to think, well, I went off the road backwards and hit a pole. And if I had gone frontwards, I probably would have died. And I started to think, well, why didn't I die? What is this about? And what's this Reiki thing? So I started to research, because I've always been a researcher. Nature was one place I felt at home, and the library has always been the other. I've been a lover of books. I've throughout my childhood would find a topic that interests me, and I would read every single book about it. I would take home 50 books from the library. And the next time I went in, the librarian would say, now what are we looking at? But so I researched energy and science, and I read every single book Greg Braden wrote, and I read every single book that Dr. Joe Dispenza wrote, and my mind was how science and spirituality are really the same thing. We can't have one without the other. That's what that's my personal view and what I've seen happen in my practice. So I decided I wanted to learn Reiki. And the day I decided to learn Reiki, I called one of my friends who had come to visit me that day, and I asked her where she learned, and she told me, and that gentleman happened to be out of the country, and I looked at some other people that were teaching weekend classes, and I felt like I didn't really want to learn it in a weekend. I wanted to dive really deep, because that's how I work. I dive really deep into things. So not 2 hours later, I got a text from another friend that said, there's a woman in your area who just posted she's teaching Reiki level 1. You should check her out. And so I called her, and I started talking to her for a little bit and told her my story, and asked her how she got into Reiki. And she told me that she channeled Mother Mary. And it's like the cycle came back around for me, because as a child, I talked to Mary all the time. I felt like she was my mother more than my mother at times. But to find out from this woman that she channels Mother Mary was just, it was a blessing. So I went to begin studying with her, and she didn't do weekend Reiki. She did weeks of Reiki, and then we had months of practice, and it was definitely a life-changing experience. And I went from level 1 to level 2, and then within a year I decided I was going to go to master level. And while I was doing the Reiki, I renewed my interest in rocks and crystals. I had been carrying them around as a child, not really knowing that I was instinctively helping myself get through my life by wearing them and carrying them. And so I went to find a teacher, and I researched all the programs that were out there, and I ended up finding that the best one came from a woman who lives in Wisconsin, which I had left. So my life came back around again. And I started to notice these synchronicities and these happenings. And I did the crystal practitioner training. And then just recently she came out with the advanced crystal practitioner training. And I went through that again. So I have this wealth of knowledge in that. And as you mentioned earlier, I had been sick a lot in my youth. I studied herbs and I studied natural medicine, and I actually was training with an acupuncturist for a little while before I left Wisconsin. I've always been interested in the medicine and healing aspect and food. So I'm going down this spiritual hole and discovering all these things, and my life has become more filled with joy, and I recognize the blessings and abundance that I have, and how that horrible, terrible experience of the car accident and what happened afterwards, without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. It was the worst, best thing that happened, because I literally left the road that I was on because it was the wrong road. And I was able to find the one that I'm on now, and the one that I'm able to more be able to help people with. Shortly after I got my Reiki Master title, I was doing bookkeeping at that time, and it was draining my soul. When I first started bookkeeping, I enjoyed it. I'm a Virgo. I like putting things in boxes, and I like things to be accurate and in line. And but then it became a chore, and I wanted to spend more time working with energy and working with energy. I love working with energy. So
Me
one
too.
day I just said, you know what? I quit bookkeeping, and I'm going to go into Reiki full time, and I'm going to use the crystal healing that I learned, and I'm going to start helping people. And again, 3 hours later, I got 2 texts from some people asking if they could work with me. They wanted me to work with them on the healing, and I took that as a sign that I was on the right path. So I reached out to a woman who had just come into the community and wanted to share space in town, and I talked with her, and within a week, I had an office, and I started to practice energy healing. I want to also go back because I forgot, but while I was laying there in bed for that year, and then after the Reiki, she came and did Reiki on me. She told me, because I was in terrible, terrible pain from the back, and my brain wasn't working so well as it does more so now. But she told me, meditation is the only thing that helped me when I had PTSD, because my body was with PTSD, you're in a constant state of fight or flight, and it's constant stress. So I started meditating every day. I was laying there. What else besides reading? The corpse pose in yoga you can only do that for so long. So I started meditating a lot for hours and days, and that also opened me up. And after I opened my practice, I started getting visions, and the clairsentient became really strong, and the claircognizance started to kick in, and I started doing Akashic readings without knowing what I was doing. I was able to look at someone and like their past lives would come in, and I'd be able to tell them, well, you're not moving forward because this is what's happening, and this is what your soul is telling you, and this is what's blocking you. And then I decided maybe I should go get some training. So I did the soul realignment course, and during that course, she said something to me that really spoke to me, and I've kind of followed it mostly, was when you find your thing and your gifts, it's don't look outside yourself anymore. Don't continually look to someone else to tell you what you're supposed to do and how to be, because that kind of interferes with your soul calling. And I kind of dropped out of researching things, and I just started to go inward, and my spiritual practice just grew exponentially because I wasn't having that outside influence. That's my journey. Not everyone does that. But so for a few years, I just practiced and I did the readings and I worked on people, and then the sound. I forgot to mention sound.
Don't
I
worry, I would have reminded you.
I started to put together that scientifically we're energetic beings, we're constantly moving, and sound just to me is naturally a healing tool because it is energy moving, it's vibration. And I did dive into the sound healing, and I did start going to classes again, and I started learning about the frequencies and the vibrations and which frequency helps heal what and how to help with chronic pain. And I really spend a lot of my time now with sound and Reiki and the crystals, and I do what I call a rise session with my one-on-one clients where I use all these things to help them rise up to meet their life in a way that is similar to my experience, by helping them realize that they're spiritual beings in a physical body, and we have to adjust our minds to that, to accept that, so that we can live in the now moment and be happy and find that joy through abundance and gratefulness.
Christy, can you say a little more about that part, the spiritual being in a physical body? You brought it up earlier, you brought it up again, and I think there's something there around, I'd say that, so I guess I don't mind sharing my age, but I'm 54 and I've only just recently come to terms with that. It took me, I'm a little slow learner in that respect. All of these things are coming to me now in my 50s that and late 40s that came and sometimes come to people well before it. But I think there's a lot around that particular thing that I think could be helpful for people to understand a bit better, if you're okay sharing your perspective.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm
How do I
asking?
talk about it
Oh,
though?
okay.
Yeah, I think so. We in religion we're taught that we're bodies with a soul in us. And I think that it's actually the opposite. We're spiritual beings, meaning that we're moving energy and we could travel from this dimension to other dimensions in time, and time is non-linear. We could be in our past selves and our future selves at the same time. So that's spiritually, but in this space at this moment in this 3D world, we're in a physical body. So our auric body, our moving body could be somewhere else, but in 3D life, we're in this body. And it's hard to adjust those two together into one, like you were saying. You didn't. So I think a lot of my clients come in and they're just learning about spirituality, or they're just delving into the concept of the fact that we're beings of light and energy. And they have all these physical problems in it. They feel like it's weighing them down, but they don't understand that it's because it's like they're tying themselves down to the body and thinking that's all we are. Is that?
Yeah. Oh, well, and something that came to me in my own experience, I think I fought it. I think I have fought being a spiritual being in a physical body. So for me, a lot of times I've spent a lot of, I would say I have escaped into the ethers. It's like I am, it's easy for me to daydream, let's say, but also to, yeah, well, I'm just, I, I, I hang out in that space almost as my natural place to be, being complete in my body, fully, fully conscious in it, has been the challenge for me. And I would almost say it's been a bit of a fight. And I don't usually use that word, but for me it has been, because it's almost like, no, I don't, this isn't as fun. And so
Right.
the word that came to me was surrender, and it may not be that for everybody, but I think it really has for me, to surrender to the fact that I am here now in this physical place, and that if I want to, for lack of a better way to put it, maximize my time in this physical realm, that accepting that I am here and for an experience helps to allow
Exactly.
it.
I guess what I mean to say is that we are here on this earth in this 3D plane to experience being human, because we come from the other realms, the angelic realms, the astral planes, in different different dimensions and all that stuff. But we're here at this moment in time to experience being human, and a lot of people don't want to experience it because it to them is just painful. We've had emotional and physical pain and things like that, and so we tend to go outside of ourselves a lot because it's hard to accept the experience that we've actually accepted that we wanted to experience before we came here.
Yeah, it's like kind of aligning unconscious and conscious, or, the whole intention about being here in this time and place. I think that's what they should teach in school. I mean, certainly all the other things they teach in school can be important too, but I think this would be a really nice thing to have learned as a kid.
Oh, absolutely. I think it would have saved a lot of us from suffering longer than we needed to.
Yeah.
There is a reason why to go through the pain of the car accident and the pain that I had as a child, because it really helped me get to where I am now. It was a catalyst to move forward. And I could have totally laid in bed for the rest of my life. The doctors just wanted to give me pain pills and call it good, but I refused to accept that.
Good for you.
Thank you.
I think the world's a better place with your having refused that.
Thank you. Well, being of service is my greatest joy, so I'm glad that I'm able to be.
Well, and so you had mentioned that you'd come to the realization that the car accident, even the whole going off the road because you were on the wrong road. How how long did it take you to make that recognition? I'm imagining when you were lying in bed in pain shortly afterwards, you're probably not in that space. But was there anything that really, was it Reiki that helped you open the doors to that realization, or was it talking to people? I'm just kind of curious. Actually, I'm really curious.
My meditation practice has brought me the most insights and realizations, I think. Meditation, definitely. But without the Reiki, working with energy and actually being able to open the claircognizance and the clairsentience to a point where I'm able to see things that I didn't see before, has really been a big part of it.
Has it helped you with you have not used this word, so I may not have it right, but kind of the emotional detachment of the, of the accident, what happened, how you were treated, and all of those things?
Oh yes, actually, I when I started learning Reiki and I started doing it on myself, the emotional part started to heal. I also did a lot of counseling, and I did some somatic work, and I did EMDR, and I did things to help move past the accident. But even then, there was still this disconnect. And sound healing and learning about the bowls and how to create frequencies and beta waves and theta waves and things like that helped heal my brain so much, though, that I was able to get out of those stuck patterns that PTSD brings with it, because you're kind of on this never-ending loop. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. I can't survive. I am just surviving. I can't live. I can't things like that. And it was able, and to this day, 7 years later, when I'm having a bad day and I'm find myself kind of falling maybe back into that pattern, I'll just get out my singing bowl and I'll start playing it, and it brings this immense calm and peace and calms the brain, and it sets me back into a state of healing.
That's amazing. And I mean, you and I share this joy of sound healing, and I find the same thing's true. For me personally, it's like I have to get to a certain point where I finally remember to do it. Sometimes it has to do with listening to music and singing with it. It's like I can always tell when it's time to do it, and then it's like I resist it temporarily until finally it's like, just do it. And then I feel so much better after having done it. I don't know.
Yes.
For you, it's like I think you've incorporated this so beautifully into your practice on a regular basis that maybe you don't face that same type of resistance. I'm still at that point of bringing it in more, and I just find it hilarious in retrospect. Not so much at the time.
Isn't that how it always is, though? Retrospect. Oh yeah. Well, even with did that study at the end of December with the chronic pain and tuning forks and how powerful they are, and I was getting a little bit of carpal tunnel pain in my hand from painting. I moved into a new house and I was painting and I was pressure washing and I had all this pain in my hand. And then one of my clients said, "Well, are you treating yourself?" So I think we all suffer from that. Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy to.
So I did. I started treating myself and my hand got better and everything's great again. Yeah. So I think we all need reminders.
Definitely. I was also curious about when you said that you were often sick when you were younger, and that you had started exploring herbs, and you said acupuncture for a little while. That was before the car accident. That was before moving to Oregon and everything.
Yes.
And
yes. I studied homeopathy. I studied herbal remedies. I studied Bach flower essences, and all those things were very helpful to me. But it wasn't until I accepted my spiritual gifts and started to channel and really like an acceptance and a surrendering to it, that things started to become more joyous for me, and I was able to. I wouldn't say I've healed from the autoimmune diseases, but I am functioning an adult and I'm able to have a more full life. I'm not wanting to go to sleep within 6 hours of waking up anymore. I've actually been working 12-hour days lately because I'm opening this center for wellness, and I have all these things in my 3D life that are keeping me very busy. But I wouldn't have been able to do any of those things without my spiritual practice, without these tools that I've learned.
well, I find it fascinating how you gravitated towards those things, the more spiritual, metaphysical things outside of religion, beyond religion, and that they almost. And do you look at them as preparation for being able to open up to your spiritual gifts, or do you see the two as being more like just two things from different areas converging to create this new life for yourself, or something else?
I think that it's probably a convergence. I wouldn't have one without the other. I wouldn't be able to recognize the difference if there's no base point. I don't know how to answer that.
No, that's okay. I was just kind of curious because to me it sounds like, for personally, I go back and I reflect on things from different parts of my life, and some of them are really interesting because they just keep popping into my head and there's something there and I don't exactly know what. Yet at the same point, I can see now in a lot of ways how I had prepared myself for where I'm at today. And without, of course, having any knowledge, and also how I had used many of my gifts in the past without having any idea I was doing it. Professionally, I worked in human resources, and I interviewed people, which is, in part what helped me to create this show, but also that I knew a lot more about the people that we were considering for jobs than it seemed anybody else in the room did, despite the fact we were all there hearing the same questions and answers. And yet I'm like, oh, I don't think that person's going to really fit, and here's why. And sometimes when we'd hire people against my recommendations, the things that I suggested might be problematic ended up being that way. I'm like, wow, I really had a very close connection to my intuitive gifts without having any idea I was doing that. I don't know what I thought. I guess I wasn't thinking about it in terms of that at all. And now I'm like, well, that does really help me, right? And the empath part, oh my gosh, I mean, those two really worked in collaboration with each other. And it's like,
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
that's why I had such a bad feeling about that guy, and it turned
Right.
out so very validating. But at the time, I didn't know that's what that was for. It was only until I was introduced to something that was energetics that I started. That was the big light for me, just like Reiki was for you. And so I'm fascinated by that path, the
Right.
trajectory.
Yes. Yes, empathetic childhood was something that I think is why I started to withdraw and be sick, because I was picking up all this toxic energy from people and didn't know what it was. Thought it was me
Oh, me
for
too.
a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Even today, I have to go through the process of, is this mine? And even just asking the question alone isn't sometimes enough. I have to lean in, I have to meditate on it, and then start recognizing I have a lot more. I think somebody else I had talked to, maybe Wendy Cooper from my last mashup, had said I'm really a very upbeat, optimistic, positive person. And that really resonated with me, because so am I. In my natural state, I'm happy. So when I'm not feeling that way, it used to always be, what did I do? What am I upset about? Always owning it. And now it's like, now I'm kind of like in the opposite, where it's like, that's not mine. And if it is, then, send me a sign and let me know, because I'm going to just reject it outright.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, so I feel like I kind of interrupted a place where you were going to go, and that was probably a good 5 minutes ago. But we're going on 15 minutes left, and I'm wondering, what else would you like to share?
What else? Let's see. I don't know. Chakra dance has been a very big part of my healing journey too, which is moving meditation. So I started to meditate in a movement instead of just sitting in the stillness. And I've been facilitating classes in that for a couple years now, and it's amazing. The women that I've worked with, how big the shifts happened because you're using movement to release that stuck energy that's holding you back. I had one woman who had divorce papers in her hand for a year and a half, and after doing chakra dance with me, she signed papers, and within 2 weeks she met her soulmate, and she's so happy right now. Just shifts like that. It's just amazing to me, and it just gets me excited, and that's why I'm opening this center right now, so I can have a space to teach more of this to people who are. I think a lot of people are starting to wake up now. I think the state of our world is pushing people to wake up
Yep.
more than they want to, and I I want to be available to them. I wanted to bring in the Lightworkers Lab. They came up on my Facebook screen one day as a group that you might like, and I saw it and I was like, well, I'm a light worker. That sounds interesting. I knew nothing about crystal or the lab or what it was, and I asked to join, and then I really didn't participate for quite a while. Things would pop up every once in a while, and I'd be, oh, that's neat, that's interesting. I know that stuff, and and it wasn't until one day I was scrolling and I saw Lauren Olivier doing a live, and on the bottom she had live from Bay City, which at that time was 5 minutes south of me. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's another person that lives by me who knows things. Because in our rural community, it's really hard to be open, and share things. So I reached out to her and I said, hey, you want to get some coffee sometime? I saw you live and saw you lived right down the street. I'd love to talk to you. So she's such a wonderful soul. She said, absolutely. And we met for coffee and we started talking, and she said, have you seen Crystal's video on Dominion? And I said, I don't know who Crystal is. And then I started to watch all of Crystal's videos one day, and I fell in love with her. She's amazing. And I really resonate with her style of being a being of love and of service, and still the humor and reality of life that she brings to everything. And then I joined her angels class, and shortly after that, her business class. And in the business class, there was a lot of people who just came out of the first intuitive intensive, and I was kind of jealous. I was like, wow, these people had this great experience. I want to be part of that. And then the next year, I said, I'm going to do that next year. And I did. And now I'm a certified reader in the Lightworkers Lab. And I did do lives for a while, but my 3D life, I had to put it on hold. I left my husband. I moved. I'm opening these businesses. I've had a lot of I'm growing.
Change.
So much change. So much change. I've dropped so much physically, emotionally, and spiritually in the last year, that I had to take a break from doing live readings, but I still do them for my clients in my office. So the Lightworkers Lab has been a very big part of my spiritual journey, and in the fact that it's a community. And when the 3D life that I'm living sometimes becomes a little too much, especially when I get resistance from people locally, I always find a home in the Lightworkers Lab, and it helps me keep moving forward. And the love and acceptance and support that I get there are just, it's unreal, and almost.
It is. It's pretty amazing, and I appreciate your bringing up the certified reader piece. Just for those of you who aren't aware, who are listening, the Lightworkers Lab has a list of all of the certified readers. If you go to their website, thelightworkerslab.com, and then I think it's /certified, which I have to say I love. But you can find a list of all of them, including a link to Christy and her work and things like that. I also love that you didn't, I always assumed you had come into the Lightworkers Lab from the other people who I know to live in your area. And so it's so amazing the synchronicity that occurred, because there are a lot of people in your area that I'm aware of, not right in your specific area, but close by. And that you were drawn to the Lightworkers Lab first, and then, learned more about the community locally, which is fabulous. I learned about you from another Lightworker. Yep.
Mark and Marianne V came to the opening of my office.
Awesome.
And I didn't even know them.
I think it was that time. I think it was them who introduced to me the idea of a sound bath. In fact, if you want to talk a little bit about what that is, that's how I had been introduced to you, was when someone mentioned that. Maybe, I don't think it was actually during one of our mashups, but it was one of the people I've had on my mashups. I've had Lauren and Mark and Marianne on my mashups. So yes, I should be in Oregon. Let's just put it that way.
Come on out.
Maybe one day. Anyway, so
love to have you.
Yeah, me too. So can you just briefly say what a sound bath is?
Sound bath is basically an immersion in sound to help to relax, release, and restore. That's how I run my sound baths. It's involving music and sound through. Sound baths are different depending on the practitioner, but I use singing bowls, Himalayan and crystal singing bowls. I use drum, I use bells, I use gong, and pretty much and my voice, anything that can make sound to help people release that stuck energy, those emotions that they are holding on to and don't know how to release. I start by bringing them into a calm state so that they're readily accepting and receiving. And then I'll use dissonant sounds to help them release those things and then bring it back to health, to restore balance through the use of sound. So basically they're laying around me or sitting around me and just taking in the vibrations. And I just did a private sound bath on Wednesday night for a group of 5 people who had never been to a sound bath before. And yeah, it's really fun to see their faces afterwards. They're just so blissed out and they're like, whoa, that was amazing. Or some people have these physical reactions and there's an emotional release, and then they're like, I don't know how you did that, but that was amazing. And so I really enjoy doing that work.
I bet. And it must be just amazing to experience. I can imagine the expressions of people, and I wonder, do you have a warning about driving afterwards, or are they able to do that? Do they have to take a breather?
I caution them to sit for a little while and drink some water and do some grounding for sure. Yes. I had one woman leave and said she drove her car up the curb and then decided to just sit for a while. It was like, I warned you, just don't leave right away.
Oh, yeah, I can see why. But at the same point, just a wonderful, I can just, I mean, it's all vibration. And
Yep.
I can totally see how people would have an emotional release after a certain period of time of that, especially in a concentrated way like what you do, and being able to, I mean, what a wonderful way to release it, in this space of high vibration and just love.
Yeah.
So it's just fabulous. I love that you do this work. And I am so appreciative that you shared with us your journey. I've known bits and pieces, but I really, it's like the more I've learned about you, the more I thought this would be a really great forum for you to share many of the things that you've been through, but also learned along the way. It's such an inspiring story of transformation in my view. So I really appreciate your coming on and sharing that with us. We have about 4 minutes left. So do you have any concluding thoughts or messages you'd like to share before we say so long?
I think I would like to just say that wherever you're at is where you're supposed to be. And just being in the now and accepting where you're at is okay. And love and gratitude is my medicine, and it could be yours too if you accept it. But I just want people to know that there is joy out there, and there is peace, and they can get there. And I hope that sharing my experience will be empowering to.
Thank you again, and certainly is empowering to me. I appreciate you, Christy, and thank you again for taking the time to join us. Thank you again for joining us today for the mashup and sharing the love with Christy. I wish you all a magical, mystical weekend and week ahead. Stay safe, stay healthy. Take care.